Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, hey. Anyway, so that's what happened on the captioning front. Hopefully that closed captioning, hopefully through the WebSocket, it will go to Twitch. Actually, I don't know if it will. It seems to work some of the time, and then other times it doesn't. So anyway, we'll figure it out over time, I'm sure. Or we won't. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, what do I do here? Let's delve into what it is we do here. Welcome into my weekly stream where I delve into the exciting world of video games. As a business economist by training, a former data analyst and public policy analyst, and as a current financial analyst, I bring a unique perspective into the world of gaming. But above all, that's right, I'm a video gamist. On my stream, you'll find me discussing the latest in video game news and how it intersects with the broader economic, financial, and public policy considerations. But don't worry, I'm not all talk. I'm also a pretty okay gamer, and I'll be showing off a variety of games, both new and old. Whether you're hardcore or you're just looking for some entertainment or maybe even some information, my stream is the perfect place to be. So join me most of the Sundays for an engaging and informative look into the world of video games. And of course, if you're watching the video later, you can always catch the stream later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Happy Time Zone YouTube. So the games I've been playing this week, Warhammer 40k Darktide and A Link to the Past. Those have been the two things that have been taking up my time. Warhammer 40k, Warhammer 40,000 or 40k. It's a franchise or that is set in. It's a universe, a dark and dreary and dystopian universe. Dystopia refers to anti-utopia, which from our perspective, at least in the West, would mean something that is not democratic, something that is not free or fair. Really, we're talking about a world that is characterized by autocracy, by fascists, by dictators. It's the kind of the norm there. It's just chaotic. That's my limited understanding of Warhammer 40k. Yeah, that's like that's what I can give you in like a paragraph as a summary. I do remember walking by game stores back in the day when those were still around, and seeing people playing Warhammer on those like tabletops, those big tabletops with all the figures spread all across it, and the rakes and all kinds of stuff. I even remember having some figures. It was probably my brother that was painting them, but I definitely remember something like that. And so anyway, in 40k, you have various factions of humans and aliens and demons that are constantly at war. And so Darktide, which is developed by Fat Shark, the same guys who brought us Vermintide and Vermintide 2, they've brought along Darktide. It's set in Tertium, which is referred to as the Hive City, and it's an industrial manufacturing powerhouse, as far as I can tell, and it's also on the brink of collapse. The Tertium has been invaded by Chaos. I guess Chaos is like this amorphous psychic corrupting force that infests the minds of humans and turns them into the enemy eventually. So basically, it's making the new space zombies and the space specialist zombies. As for the gameplay itself, it's really engaging. It's super engaging. It feels really good. The kind of loop is that you'll go over to the mission board. I was gonna say trudge. It's not. You don't trudge, but you do. You run over to the mission board and you you see what tasks you can take on to push the Chaos insurgents back and out of Tertium, out of the Hive City. Those tasks are like go corrupt data, or go gather data, or gather scientific samples, or assassinate special targets, or repair machinery, or all kinds of things like that. But when you're starting out, chances are you'll play like on the first difficulty level for maybe like one time or twice, and then you'll be stuck on level 2 for quite some time. I think, you know, if you'll try level 3, and chances are you'll get swatted down because you just won't do enough damage. And it feels like not until you reach, like, I don't know, maybe level 25 or level 30 that you really feel good about going into level 3. It's all gear dependent. It's all like, as you level up, more powerful stuff will become available, and you've been earning currency the whole time, and you'll buy it, but it's kind of a grind. And there's no, you don't necessarily get to share currency or anything across your characters, and so it's like it really is built around making you go for quite the grind. But I mean, well, actually no, I was gonna, well, there are, should I call them microtransactions? They are like kind of in-game purchases that you can make, but they actually seem to be all cosmetic. I didn't see anything so far that was, oh, you know, buy this to help you grind less. So yeah, just how Left 4 Dead did the, you know, the regular weak zombies, that you had the 6 specialist zombies. They have the same thing going on here, right? Over here you have a sniper that'll like really mess you up from long range usually. Sometimes the sniper spawns in close, and it's kind of funny. It's like, all right, hey, thanks for the easy kill. You have a gunner that'll just like lay down huge suppressing fire, and whoever they're targeting, that person really won't be able to aim well. It's a mechanic that when you're getting shot at, you can't, if you try to aim down your sights, it'll like jostle you all over the place. So you're really forced to get into cover. They have, so that's the gunner. They have a demo man, like a grenade dude that just like chucks these Molotov type of weapons. They have a tank that charges at people, and then a boomer that explodes on people. And then finally there's a netter, just this person that goes around shooting nets and capturing people. They don't drag you away, but they stop you in your tracks, and someone on your team has to go and rescue you. Closer to when the game launched, I definitely complained about a few performance issues that were there. My game would really lag quite well. But since then, it's gotten a lot smoother without me changing too much. Actually, what I will say is that when I started playing, there wasn't really any option within GeForce Experience for me to optimize the settings. And so it was really left up to me to figure out what it is that works and doesn't work, depending on the game. And that can be really difficult for me. Like I'm your average user. Yeah, I might know like a little bit more than the rest, but I'm certainly not a super technical user. Like, for example, if you are a game developer and you know what exactly each option means and how that relates to your own system, that's not me, right? What I do know is whenever I see ray tracing, I turn that shit off, right? it just doesn't work well for me. And that's what I did. I turned ray tracing off, and it seemed to work a lot better. But after they got that figured out with the GeForce Experience, and I could actually see it in there, and I ran it through the optimizer or whatever, it started to work a lot better. Also update your drivers. I found it funny that there's a little disclaimer on their launcher for the game that says update your drivers. Make sure you do that. So yeah, anyway, coming to or going back to the gameplay aspect of it, right? The movement, it feels good for the most part. There's a dodge mechanic. If you press side or back on your keyboard and hit your spacebar too, lets you dodge side to side or even back. That feels really good. The one thing though is that there is a slide, but it's like kind of funny to see people do it, especially the Ogren. There's like a big, like huge character that like towers over the rest, and even your camera angle is higher than the rest. So it's really funny to see them try to slide around. But when you do it, you think of Apex Legends, how that slide feels in that game, and then you just realize that this slide isn't that, and then you kind of get upset about it. That was my experience anyway. So anyway, for equipment, or like the stuff that you get, the weapons that you get to put on, I feel those are good, but they're not necessarily great. My position is that I don't think, I haven't played all the way to the end game, right? So that I have to give that up first. But I don't feel like there's a huge amount of build diversity that's going to be there, because you don't necessarily have a lot of things that you can combine. So you have a primary melee weapon, you have a secondary weapon that is a range type of gun option, and then you have one type of grenade. That's all you have. And then you have like 3 trinkets that you can equip that so far just kind of seem like, oh, they're like stat boost type of thing. You don't have armor at all. They're just cosmetic things. And I mean, maybe at the end game you'll be able to make some sort of interesting builds, but for example, with the Ogren, you know, I've gotten to the point where I have this, like, I have a sweet big shield and a mace, right? So I have a shield and a mace, but then I also have on my other secondary weapon, I have a railgun. And that feels pretty good. But then with the grenade, all it is like a long range kind of single target option. It just feels terrible. And I just wish that there were different ways that I could combine different grenades with different guns to say, okay, well, my grenade's gonna help me with crowd control, and then this gun's gonna do like a whole bunch of AoE damage or stuff like that. And it just doesn't, like, class to class, it doesn't seem like you get to make those kind of choices that I think you do in other games. It makes me think of Deep Rock. It makes me think of how Deep Rock had that kind of stuff that you could do, where you could swap around multiple different things and weapon traits. Right here, you get, like, each character also has a skill tree, but it's just like within each row, you get a choice between 3 talents for, I don't know, maybe it's like 7 or 8 columns of that within 3 rows. Choose one in a column. But again, it's, you know, even that, when I go through and I look at that, I've played the Zealot and I've played the Ogren, I look at the 3 and I'm like, all right, this one's the best one. I really don't feel from each one that I'm like, oh, that, you know, I really feel like one's better than the other 2, and I picked that one, and I'm probably not going to change it around. Or I haven't yet seen how else it can be combined to be an interesting thing for me. Anyway, that's just my experience. I don't know. I'm sure there are other people that have different experiences, and that's totally fine. So another thing to mention, though, with the story, it's a little bit different from Vermintide and Vermintide 2 if you've played those, in that you're not playing a character that already exists in the fiction. Instead, you're playing a character that you have created, and you have assigned a backstory to that character. But some, whatever, 10ish hours in that I'm in, maybe split. Well, actually, I've mostly played the Zealot, really. Or I played them the furthest anyway, to level 20. I've yet to see how my unique character's backstory really matters in the broader story that's unfolding in that place. You know, at certain points when you finish a mission and you level up, you just kind of click obey. You'll get a screen that will tell you obey, and you'll click obey, and then you'll go trudge along, and your character will look really sullen and listen to some NPC introduce you to another NPC for some other system that I probably don't have the currency for, or that's just kind of like, and then you're like, okay, and then you walk away and you go back to the mission board, right? So in the end, what that ends up being in some is just, it's a game that I keep coming back to because the gameplay is really satisfying and done really, really, really well, but not really something that I come for the story, because I don't find it particularly, like, it hasn't really engaged me that much so far. I don't know, maybe if I just get more playtime in it and I see more of it, then all of a sudden it'll hit, it's just building up now, it'll hit a climax point, and then that'll be like, oh damn, okay, we're here now, right? But we haven't reached there. We haven't reached that part of the narrative, that's for sure. I haven't. So yeah, that's Darktide. It's a solid game. I think if you have Game Pass, you should play it. I think if you like Left 4 Dead, and if you liked Vermintide and you liked Vermintide 2, then you should get it. It's only $40. You don't need to buy anything else after that, even though you can, but you don't have to. And you can enjoy the game. So that's that. The second game that I played was Link to the Past. So I played through 100%. Well, maybe like 95%. I played most of Link to the Past, and there's like an asterisk on that because I did it in a practice ROM hack. But I just needed to, because I needed to, as soon as possible, see everything or most of the things at least once before tomorrow evening, when I have to do a Link to the Past randomizer seed for my secret Saha, which a community member in the bazaar named Sawyer made for me. So that'll be that. So this, of course, it's Nintendo's 1991 action-adventure game, which is widely thought to be one of the greatest video games of all time. In that game, you control a protagonist who you can name, but is named Link in the canon, as Link goes out on a quest to save Zelda and to defeat the evil sorcerer Aghanim. But spoiler alert, as in most Zelda games, the main antagonist or the final boss is usually an entity named Ganon or Ganondorf. In this game, Ganon takes the form of a big old pig, and is only revealed much later on as such. So the game itself, it has a kind of like a top-down perspective, and it features surprisingly deep and varied puzzles. It has really engaging combat. It has good graphics for the 90s, and especially the early 90s, and it has a good storyline. And there are a variety of non-linear ways in the vanilla game that you can tackle objectives in the world. This kind of combination of characteristics or features for the game at the time really outclassed what other games were doing. And somehow I completely freaking missed it. Like completely. I think on our SNES, me and my brother were playing like X-Men Mutant Apocalypse or something like that. And like Mario Kart. Anyway, yeah, I think my first introduction to Zelda, a franchise, was probably Ocarina of Time and some of Majora's Mask. But anyway, yeah, as I say, I have that Saha seed to do tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Eastern. So I checked out all the dungeons and all the boss encounters and all the item locations, all that kind of stuff. But what I'll do is I will take a quick opportunity to tell you a little bit about the Bazaar, the community where I'll be playing this version of the game, and where like-minded gamers connect. So the Bazaar is a community that looks to create a safe space for gamers of all backgrounds to connect, play, and learn, while encouraging and supporting community members to grow within the community and to give back to the world around them. Ultimately, we want to become a leading community of passionate gamers that harnesses the diversity of its members to offer unique and engaging experiences. If you're interested, I invite you to type the exclamation Bazaar command in this chat, which will provide you the details, or I invite you to just DM me if that doesn't work, because chances are it doesn't. Just send me a message. I'd be happy to invite you. So anyway, back to Link to the Past. I worked through every boss, every dungeon, and so I've seen everything once, and I hope that'll help me when I do the seed, though chances are I'll forget. Hopefully it'll be like somewhat familiar. My gifter let me know that I have a flute, so it's going to let me kind of fly around the world, and that'll make things a lot easier. And I'll be sitting with them, hopefully. So if something goes wrong, I'm sure somebody will be there to help me. And I mean, there are always facts and walkthroughs, right? So I can always do that. I'm not above it. So anyway, I wasn't really keeping a timer going. I think it probably took me like maybe 10 to 11 hours for an almost 100% run. And I used guides to help me navigate the dungeons, because without like intensive use of that, it would taken me much longer to see everything that I needed or wanted to see. As I said, I used a practice ROM hack, which was excellent. It lets you It lets you experience with different setups in the game. It lets you warp back and forth to locations. It lets you check out different like routing type of options through the game. And yeah, it really holds up. It really holds up, and the game really holds up and checks out. You know, the gameplay, the graphics, the sound, the puzzle design, the combat, the adventure, the story. It's all really good. And then you take that a step further and you think about the whole other aspect of this, which is the randomizer that's there. And there's a whole other thing to talk about that, about how interesting that aspect of it is. But myself, I'm not an expert in it, so I'm not really in a position to talk about it. I do think that would be a neat thing to talk about though in the future. So hey, I mean, maybe as I get more experience, or if I get more familiar with it, or you know, if there's somebody else who wants to hop on and explain what's going on with the randomizer, what this is all about, then I think that would be a really fascinating discussion to have, and a worthwhile one. You know, well, what is it? What does it do to the game? How is it fun? Or why is it fun? How is it engaging? Those kind of questions, and it'd be interesting to think on those and give some answers. Anyway, that's that for this week. Man, I feel like I've been going on for a little bit. I'm just gonna take like maybe 5 minutes here, and then I'll get into the news. So hang tight. I'll be right back. There we go. That's what I wanted. Hi. Oh, hey, I'm back. Welcome back to the world of video games. It's time to get into the news. Oh man. So January has been quite a bleak month for video games news, or the technology sector in general. It's particularly been a bleak week. But really a bleak month. Just a ton of layoffs that have been happening. I think that'll end up being the theme of the month. And there are a whole bunch of articles, like each one by one I could link and talk about. But I think I'll just summarize it broadly. You know, there's one article that I have here from the Washington Post. This is by Shannon Liao, a staff writer for them, who kind of summarizes it all and picks out big players. But you know, Microsoft announced last week that they were going to cut 10,000 jobs, and this included at its developers 343 Industries, who the coalition, and Bethesda. 343, who were the ones that were working on Halo, or were kind of gatekeeping Halo. And there's a whole lot to delve into 343 and Halo. I don't have all the details ready on that, so I'm not ready to talk about it. You know, it would just be speculation. But the summary from what I'm hearing is that they just couldn't get off the ground, and they're caught between taking a front role in development of Halo properties versus taking a supervisory role to say, you know, just focus on if development's going to be outsourced to different players, then we'll supervise it and make sure that it's living up to the standard that is, or the identity that is Halo. Anyway, so that's probably something in the future to talk about. Google also announced that it was cutting 12,000 jobs, not specifically all for gaming, but it is important to note that Stadia is officially, you know, canned. They announced that a while back, but they officially, it ended on January 18th. That's in advance of them saying that Google saying that they're going to focus more on AI. Focusing more on AI is in response to ChatGPT. Google is saying that they're going to be releasing at least 20 new AI products in the coming year. So I'm not saying that 12,000 people were cut because of that, but basically what this means, and it's an industry-wide trend, is that people are just there. If you're a public corporation right now, investors are telling you to cut costs and to get back to profitability, and that's kind of what's happening. And I'll chat more about that later. There was also Ubisoft, which I had talked about earlier, I think last week. From a Financial Times opinion piece that I saw on the Lex, they were talking about how Ubisoft was writing off 500 million euros of capitalized research and development. How Ubisoft was estimating about 200 million euros of restructuring, basically, which undoubtedly means that you're going to have layoffs as you decide to close down certain operations. And they were estimating, the Financial Times was estimating that there was going to be a 400 million euro loss for Ubisoft in their current fiscal year. Unity Software, the video games building software maker and simulation maker, confirmed that they were going to be eliminating 284 jobs. And Riot Games, League of Legends and Valorant, they laid off 46 employees on Wednesday, talking about shifting priorities and organizational changes. So the key thing, though, and I think CBS also did some stuff, and certainly there was like it's even reaching over to games media too, which I'll talk about later. But I think the key thing to highlight here, or like the common thread, is I'm pretty sure for the most part we're talking all about public company operations. And so, right, you'll see people on Twitter or like whatever, they'll just go like, oh, capitalism, which is a little bit oversimplistic, but I don't disparage it because I understand it and I empathize with it. Yeah, it's capitalism. But I think, there's a whole bunch of companies that are reacting to what I think is a shift or an expected shift in consumption patterns, and a shift away from a low interest environment, and a shift away from being okay with investment and taking on debt and growth. So I mean, you think about when the pandemic happened and what that did to retail, and you think about how that kind of stuff, consumption kind of went away from physical retail and then it went to online retail. If you have a whole bunch of people that used to be coming into the office, then geographically that activity, and then they were staying home wherever home was, then geographically that activity changed, right? And then you had a whole bunch of more digital possibilities because people were just sitting at home, right? So yeah, you had like more people playing MMOs, like specifically to gaming, you had like more people playing MMOs, or like it could even outside of gaming, it could have touched on, more people were buying shit on Amazon. There's just like these kind of shifts that prompted, people in the tech space to make a lot of investment because interest rates were low. It was really easy to take out debt. Investors were okay to see growth. They're like, yeah, it's a pandemic. We're expecting maybe we'll see losses. We never like losses. Maybe we'll see them. It'll be okay. Just show us that you're gonna make choices that will drive to future profitability. And now that we're kind of flipping back, and now you were in full time in the office, and now you went all the way full time home. But now we're coming to somewhere in the middle. Even though the pandemic isn't necessarily over, it's not. There's still a disease is still out there. It's still like evolving or whatever. I think for the most part, businesses are pretty happy to pretend that it doesn't exist. And I think governments are following along as well and pretty happy to say, well, whatever. It's there. People get sick, whatever. We'll deal with it then. But we're just going to get on with it. And so we're somewhere in the middle now. And what that means is that if you were somebody like Microsoft and you hired 40,000 people thinking that you're going to produce for a certain, you're going to produce a certain level of output, and there was going to be that demand for it, and then now we're somewhere in the middle, and we have higher interest rates, which means that it's more costly to pay your interest, it's more costly to borrow, and investors are concerned, and investors are saying, hey, we we would rather see you be profitable rather than take risks, then you're going to see stuff like this happen where they start shedding, or I shouldn't say shedding jobs casually, where they start laying off people, firing people, to focus on whatever they think it is that's going to get them the best return on investment, basically. And so that's how I conceptualize it. That's how I think about it. So yeah, but at the end of the day, within all of that, there's still a huge societal cost that is there. And I just think about the people who have gotten fired or laid off or whatever it is, and what supports are there what supports are there for them, right? What's there to support them? And I would wager the answer is not very much. I don't know the jurisdictions that well, as we're largely talking about the US and I'm sitting here in Canada. But from what I know, not much. I think it helps if you worked for a company that is more prestigious, or that has both the funding and certain standards on what severance should be and what severance should include. Like, is there post severance kind of, or not post severance, but is there post after you get laid off, is there training available, or do they help you essentially find your next job, right? Because that's, even when my mom got laid off during the pandemic, that's what happened. She was working for a pretty good organization that did that and gave her like 3 full months of support from employment consultants that helped her through and helped her prepare herself for the next kind of job, which she was able to land. Anyway, so my heart goes out, and I really hope that for the people who are out there trying to figure out what's next, that they can get support however they can. Whether it's if you're in tech, and if you're doing streaming, or you're doing some sort of content stuff or whatever, shout outs to Voidburger, shout outs to Unistrike. I really hope that they find a soft landing. So that's that for the month of layoffs, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. This other story I saw, it's from GameIndustry.biz. It's by James Batchelor, editor-in-chief, talking about the European Parliament voting to take action against loot boxes. Adriana Maldonado Lopez is a member of the European Parliament there and serves on the Committee on the Internal Market and Consumer Protection. She's issued a report that calls for the European Commission to address several issues in the games industry, which it believes will protect consumers, especially youth. So the European Parliament voted on January 18th to adopt this report. Lopez is calling for more than a dozen recommendations, including harmonized rules across the EU, providing clear info about games content, providing clear info about systems that help, or the rating systems themselves that would help parents understand and control how much time and money their children spend on games. The article explains the Pan-European Game Information Rating System, or PEGI, which is, it was highlighted as an example of something that could deliver more transparent information about content, about target age groups, and about in-game purchase options. And members of Parliament of the European Parliament, voted to have this commission analyze the impact of loot boxes and the prompts to make in-game purchases, and asked it to take action if necessary, and to investigate whether gold farming can be linked to financial crimes and human rights abuses. That committee has called for developers to, quote, avoid designing games that feed addiction, with Lopez citing the WHO's recognition of gaming disorder as an example of the state of addiction among some players. I think in general, that article talks about what the industry reaction is, and I mean, to sum up, basically, surprise, the industry says that they support fair and transparent consumer experience, but they're anti-regulation, right? They assert that the markets don't need any interference, they don't need any government intervention, and that the industry is perfectly capable of self-regulating. So, I mean, so to try to assess that, on the face of it, it looks like, you know, these rating systems themselves, they're self-regulation by industry committees. But as far as I know, they really only focus on what should be allowed to be bought by who, depending on age. And they don't really consider what shouldn't be allowed to be sold, or any societal impacts therein. It's kind of out of scope for them. I know they do some labeling on loot boxes as disclaimers, but even that, from what I can tell, is inconsistently applied, depending on jurisdiction. PEGI itself is owned by the Interactive Software Federation of Europe, which itself is an industry association that advocates for their members' interests, and their members, of course, are video game developers, right? So either public or private corporations that sit on boards and have the organization has kind of like a board of directors that oversees their interests. There's also a coalition called the International Age Rating Coalition, the IARC, which is a nonprofit, again, formed by various video game industry stakeholders. And they are there to create an international system for rating video games and apps. But when I think about when I go back to what Lopez is saying, all these rating systems, I don't see how that is regulating how purchases are made, and whether those purchases are being made in good faith or not. There's kind of a disconnect there, and I think that's a gap in terms of the regulations or the self-regulations. When I read this article, I think about the FTC's position on Epic Games. In December 2022, Epic was fined about $245 million because of their unlawful practices around gathering personal information and for unfair sales tactics that were essentially suckering in purchases, which legal guardians did not consent to or approve to. Right? Imagine your kid getting a hold of your phone and just like hitting, I don't know, like entering a PIN or entering a password or something like that, or even in other cases, just, you know, somehow getting you to, or somehow a parent maybe unknowingly pressing their thumb on a fingerprint and then one tap buy type of thing, right? And then to boot, you know, let's say that you, as a parent, you made an accidental purchase because you accidentally hit your thumb and it just kind of went through. Epic would only give you 3 refunds lifetime, and their refunds process was an entire mess that essentially wouldn't let people get their money back if they actually had made a mistake or whatever it is. So, you know, when I look at what the EU is doing, I think it's a positive sign that they're paying attention and they're taking some steps to address it. I think, much like the state of journalism in games, regulation in games is not yet caught up to where it needs to be, especially in lieu of it approaching the $200 billion US mark in terms of global valuation of what the video games market is worth in the world. That's US dollars. So, you know, to sum up, I don't think that video game developers will be willing or capable to self-regulate to protect consumers, because I don't think that's their primary goal of a developer. Definitely not from a business side. If you're a public corporation, your primary goal is to drive value to shareholders. That's it. And it just so happens that, well, you'll do that by making really good games that people will buy, right? For a private corporation, you'll drive value for your owners, but in this case, there's a chance that your owner could be passionate about video games, and there's like some synergy there. I think that's a better look for me personally when I think about it. I just think that, you know, You have less influence from general investors that don't really care about video games. Maybe they do, but I mean, I would think for the most part, investors and corporations wouldn't really care. They'd just be like, hey man, is this giving me a return or not? No? Okay, well then do something so that it gives me a return. Anyway, so in my view, it's really up to the government to provide regulation necessary to protect their constituents and to protect their markets. And I would argue that it's not happening to a large extent because governments don't understand the industry. Governments lag behind in law and in regulations. I think we can all say that, and we all probably know that, but definitely in video games, it's not yet well understood. And so, I was glad to see this kind of article and this kind of member of parliament taking the charge on this. I think that's really cool and something that I wish that we would see more of in Canada. That's for sure. So anyway, coming back to the other thing I wanted to talk about was journalism, right? Video game news. Layoffs even extended to games media and coverage. And it just made me think of like what a troubling time it is for news in general. And this isn't new. I mean, I think we all know that print presses or newspapers have suffered with the decline of print presses and the rise of digital media. Advertising revenues that they used to get just crashed. And so news organizations had to cut staff to save on costs. And ultimately it decreases the amount of things that they're able to push out. It decreases readership and it decreases the quality of the product. And then individuals on the other side, not really wanting to purchase subscriptions to news outlets, they just go elsewhere. And in part, they just turn to individuals online, whether those are influencers or those are YouTubers, or they're just looking to get free coverage of things wherever they can, regardless of whatever journalistic integrity might be there or not there behind it. I think in an ideal world, if you were looking to go get some information from somewhere, you'd go to a solid newspaper for an unbiased, independent opinion on a subject. And you'd get informed you'd get informed and then you'd be able to make a good decision based off of that. Nowadays, in the struggle to get funding, you'll get a whole lot more industry sponsored type of stuff. And that stuff's rife with bias. So you'll have influencers or YouTubers or whatever that are like on the dime of the companies that are peddling their product. And if you're in that position and you report the unbiased opinion, then, and particularly if it's a criticism, that's it. Your funding's cut and you're cut, right? And I think that's no different for video games coverage. And again, like that Newzoo figure that keeps sticking in my head, it's going to be worth $200 billion US. It's mind-boggling that is the state of affairs for media coverage in the industry. For me, whereas I used to subscribe to different outlets for information, as the quality of the information that I was looking for decreased and kind of turned into more like this entertainment type of thing, I turned away from it and I started just looking for individuals on the internet that I could trust. That's why I end up going to Twitch and I go to Patreons of specific people, like a Nextlander or a Jeff Gersman or a NoClip or a Giant Bomb or a GameSpot or GamesIndustry.biz or Jeff Grubb. The difference is that, I'm willing to pay for good information, but I don't know. I just feel like paying the subscription cost for news in the way that we used to do, it just isn't worth it anymore. Especially, I mean, specifically talking about when you're trying to get news on video games and specific to that field, there's just no subscription that holds up. Like I still, for example, in terms of like regular newspaper, broader journalism, I subscribe to the Financial Times. You know, if it wasn't the Financial Times, I would probably go for a Bloomberg subscription. But even that is like, man, I just wish that there was a better option there where you could get more access, even if limited, to a broader variety of publications. Anyway, so where do we go from here? I think from a video games developer standpoint, just to sum up on all the things I've been talking about, from a video games developer standpoint, I think we're seeing lots more talk about unionization as a way to secure worker protections. And I think particularly in the US, that's definitely an avenue that's worth exploring. I'm also definitely interested in taking a deeper look into that in the future. Again, for video games, I think company privatization is an avenue that's definitely worth exploring to remove the influence of general investors on video game development, because I think it's generally a negative one that's hampering the lives of developers and hampering the quality of their products. And then on the news angle, on a broader kind of level, I think we need to explore how we can incorporate like a subscription-based service for news that could amalgamate different feeds. You know, like I just think about like a Netflix for news. You could have like a coalition of sorts between different news organizations, and then they give a price of entry to a sample of you know, like an entry level sample of information, but good information from good publications. And then if you pay a little bit more, you pay the next tier, or like a monthly sub, then you get this kind of next tier of specifically tailored information. I think there's something there that, you know, like I think like either a Netflix, but for news, or like a Game Pass, but for news, right? Anyway, for video games news though, like I don't know what the answer specifically is. I think we probably need to be more vocal to our politicians on the importance of the video game news sector, of the video game sector, even though that feels like a hopeless kind of daunting task. And I think ultimately we need to think about what's a revenue model for video games news that is able to provide return to private investors who are passionate about video games. And see the importance of journalism, how to convince them the importance of it, and you know, how can we find those passionate people who want to support it. And then just on public company, like the public company avenue of things, I think that's a disaster, and it just won't work because there won't be enough government intervention to support it. And without enough lobbying of the government to support it, it's just not a priority for governments. And even if it's not a priority, and beyond that, regardless of that, they wouldn't even understand it anyway. So anyway, that's my thoughts. I think anyway, yeah, that's that. Why don't I move on to a game here? I wanted to check out Hitman 3, World of Assassination. So one sec while I get that going. But Hitman 3. So Hitman 3 was released on January 2021 for PS5. PS4, Xbox, XS, Xbox One, and now the shutdown Stadia. And it was the final game of the World of Assassination trilogy that they had, succeeding Hitman 1 from 2016 and Hitman Season 1, whatever, I'll just call it Hitman 1, and Hitman 2 from 2018. These are stealth action games that are developed by IO Interactive. Sorry, I'm just getting the game going. Right. So stealth action games developed by IO Interactive. Hitman 1 or Season 1 was published by Square Enix, who considered it to be an underperformer, despite the game getting really positive reviews. And that's not too surprising because I think anytime Square Enix has anything in outside of Japan, they'll always say that it's an underperformer. And that's a whole other story. I don't think Square Enix has anything left in outside of Japan, but I'm not sure because they're pulling something out that seems kind of unique and not altogether Japan. So anyway, they divested of IO Interactive. They divested of their publishing rights. And IO Interactive took on the rights to the series itself and then partnered with Warner Brothers to publish Hitman 2 in 2018, or Season 2. Hitman 3 is published by IO Interactive itself. And who is IO Interactive? They are a Denmark-based developer founded in 1998. They've published a variety of games, notably the Hitman properties, even since 2000s when it was owned and by Eidos Interactive. They did Freedom Fighters in 2003, which is now actually available on the PC in a re-release as of 2020. That's a cult action classic, third-person shooter type of game set in an alternate reality, 1953. Where the Soviet Union has invaded the United States. They also did the Kane and Lynch series, so Kane and Lynch Dog Days and Kane and Lynch Dead Men. That's 2 in 1. Dog Days was Dead Men was first, and then Dog Days was second. That first game, so Dead Men I played. I think Dog Days I started up and I was like, I've had enough of Kane and Lynch. So, and that was between 2007 and 2010. Again, those were third-person action type of shooters. But they were kind of like linear. And they were intentionally dirty and crude. And now, after Hitman, they're also working on Project 007, which is it's a working title that they have for a new James Bond title that will come out eventually. I'm not even sure when. They're working on it though. And I'm sure there's more, but that's kind of like the short list of the notables. In general, Hitman 1, 2, and 3 have been bangers. They're great games and great experiences that gamers should get to. I largely missed out on these for various reasons. In 2016, when Hitman 1 came out, I was just out of a second run at university, and I was looking for a job. I missed out on Hitman 2 in 2018 because I had found a much better job and I had moved towns for it. And then in 2021, I was adjusting to a new kind of pandemic reality, and so I missed out on Hitman 3. And finally, in 2023, I find myself in a time and a place where I can look to experience the Hitman trilogy. And boy, howdy, I'm excited about that. So, when I think about how these games were received by gamers and by the industry, Hitman Season 1 was positively received and reviewed. I remember watching a lot of different outlets playing it, and it was a lot of fun. I laughed quite a bit at just kind of like the antics that would happen with that game. They had open-ended level design. They had different ways to approach the objectives. Pretty smart AI that would be responsive to player actions. They had pretty well put together stealth mechanics that just flat out worked. And on top of that, they had aesthetically pleasing characteristics, things like visual design or the soundtrack was engaging and the voice acting was top notch. All of these things, when put together, you had a really great product. But on the negative side of things, people didn't really take well to having to be online all the time, which is still carried out, throughout the Hitman games here, or IO's Hitman games. You've got to be online always, and the the kind of periodic release schedule that they had for different content that would come out, paid content as well, didn't sit well with people because they feel like when they purchased it at the beginning, they were buying an unfinished game, and then they were getting nickeled and dimed for more and more content later. It's just so happened the content was good, which makes it better, or it makes it easier to stomach that. But even in 2016, one of the big games that came out was Street Fighter V, and I remember feeling that same way about Street Fighter V. I remember buying that when it dropped. I remember paying $80 for it, and then when I opened it up, realizing that, oh shit, this game doesn't even look like it's finished yet, and then later on seeing all the things that they would try to sell you, or otherwise that you'd have to grind for, and it kind of made me sick, right? So if Hitman was doing the same thing in 2016, that's not altogether surprising, and probably something that would have turned me off anyway. That's how it went down for Hitman 2016 for the full experience. To their credit, there was free updates as well, like new items, free items, free challenges, and contracts, etc. And then in 2018, Hitman 2 came out, and again, it had really positive reviews, and it was praised for much the same things and criticized for much the same things. But they were given additional praise for fixing issues and for making their AI better, and then for adding some new features, right? So they added a sniper assassin mode, which is a multiplayer co-op type of thing, and then they added a ghost mode, which is a competitive multiplayer mode. And then in 2021, Hitman 3 comes out, and again, they get really positive reviews. They get praised for the same reasons that they got praised in the first place. And then they get praised for some new things that are added as well. One thing that was noted was a briefcase feature so like in Hitman, depending on what disguises you're wearing, your character is seen to be allowed to carry certain items. So for example, if you're disguised as a police officer, well then your police officer is allowed to be carrying a gun that's visible. Whereas if you were dressed as a civilian, you wouldn't be allowed to have a gun that's visible. And so maybe a briefcase allows you to carry around things that are concealed in a way that otherwise you wouldn't have been able to. So anyway, suffice it to say, these are pretty great games. I've played it a little bit so far. I've enjoyed what I have played so far, and I look forward to delving into it a bit deeper. Oh, let's see here. Let's take it out. All right, y'all. I gotta go. It's been a while. Been on for longer than I thought I would, but hey, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for listening to me chat away, and thanks for watching Hitman. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I'm gonna have to check that out more. And yeah, I'll be back next week to chat again. We'll see what I'll do, but definitely Sunday. That's the plan. So till then, take care of yourselves and peace. And yeah, we'll see you then.